You've been hired. Welcome. My name is Mark. I'm going to be your instructor for this course. In this course, you've been hired to create a high-converting sales page using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And we're going to do just that. In the first video in this course, I'm going to show you the final output, what the full page is going to look like. In the following videos, we'll then break it down language by language. We'll create our structure in HTML, and in the following video, we'll create our design using CSS. And finally, we'll include some interactive elements using JavaScript. This course is perfect for someone who just finished studying HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and now wants to integrate those through languages into a professional level project. This project is a lot of fun, and it's yours. When we're done, you're welcome to take it, enhance it, call it your own, and include it in your portfolio. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at our sales page in the actual browser window. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that even though you're designing your page with a large screen monitor or a laptop or something like that, the people viewing your page may be using a mobile device, a tablet, or a laptop themselves. We've got to use a technique called responsive design. That ensures that our page looks good and is usable across an array of different screen sizes. And I think the responsive design elements are a really good place to start looking at our page. I've got our page open in the Google Chrome browser, and I have our developer tools open. You don't know how to get the developer tools open? Look in the upper right-hand corner of your browser window. Click the three dots, go to More Tools, and Developer Tools. The developer tools include an emulator, so you can look at your page in different screen sizes. Right now we're looking at how it would look on a 1920 by 1080 screen. That's standard HD. But I also could see how it would look on a mobile device. For example, an iPhone 12. And notice our page is still intact. Or on an iPad Air. I can even rotate the device and see how the page will look. I'm going to leave this on 1920 by 1080. And by the way, if you're interested, you can turn the emulation mode on and off by clicking the icon right here at the top of your developer tools. The page itself is a fairly straightforward page. On the right-hand side, we have the product details and an image of the 3D printer kit that we're selling. We have an image, a description, and a price, exactly what you'd see in a standard online catalog. We have the name of our item on the left, 3D printer kit, and then we have our order form. Our order form is broken into several parts. First, we have a quantity ordered. I wanted to limit the quantity to 5, so I made this a drop-down with the values 1 through 5. A place for the customer to enter their name and their email address. Notice when I started entering my email address, that pop-up came, please make sure your email is correct. I'm going to finish my email, and it disappears. Let's enter my email again, but purposely add a mistake. And notice I didn't put in the dot in my email address. That alert remains. So in order for that alert to go away, we've got to have a properly formatted email address like that. I'll show you how that works when we look at the code. Enter my phone number. That's not my real phone number. We can choose a shipping method. And then we can enter our billing address. So I'll enter my office address. So we have a state drop-down here. We're going to choose Connecticut and our zip code. Now the shipping address, if it's the same as the billing address, I can just check this off and it fills in automatically. If I remove the check, I can enter a separate billing address. We're going to leave our billing address the same, and then I choose a method of payment. If I choose PayPal, notice it asks for my PayPal email address, and if I choose a credit card, it asks for my credit card information, name, card number, expiration date, calendar widget there, and then the 3-digit security code. The place to order button is not actually implemented. In other words, it's not going to a server, but it does add up the total cost. The total cost comes from the quantity ordered and the shipping method. we'll get a different value now. And that's basically the form and how it works. There is one thing I wanted to point out here, and you'll notice that the PayPal or credit card information doesn't appear until we actually have a method of payment selected. There's actually a good reason for this. We want to limit the number of choices the user has. The more options the user has, the more likely they're going to make a mistake or that we're going to get dirty and incorrect data. So when we limit what the user can choose and what the user can fill out, we're actually doing the user a favor. So only displaying parts of the interface when they're relevant is a good technique to make sure that you're getting more correct data. All right, so now we've demonstrated how our sales page looks and how it operates. Next, we're going to take a look at the HTML. Not counting the image, there are 3 files that make up our code. There's an HTML file, a JavaScript file, and a CSS file. Each of these files contains a separate type of code which does a separate job. The HTML marks up the purpose of each element, the CSS holds our design, and the JavaScript is used for the interactive elements of our page. Right now, we're going to start by looking at the HTML. Let's start right at the top with our document type declaration. This simply declares that this is an HTML5 document. The older type of doc type declaration was much longer. With the HTML5 iteration, we've shortened it. Then we've got our opening HTML tag. This opens the actual HTML. And then we have our head element. This is the head section of the document. The head section is for metadata and information about our actual page, as well as links to other files. The head section of our document contains 3 things. It contains metadata about our page. It contains links to CSS and other necessary resources, and it contains the document title. You can see all 3 here. We've got 2 meta tags, the first for the character set, the second to set up our viewport that sizes the document correctly on mobile screens. We've got a link to our CSS page, sales.css, and then our title. The title tag serves 3 purposes. First, if the user bookmarks the page, it's used as the default title for the page being bookmarked. Second, it's used by search engines. Search engines use the title to index the page. You're supposed to use the title tag to tell a search engine what the page is all about. And finally, the value of the title tag appears in the tab on most web browsers for the page itself. And now we'll move on to the document body, and that's where everything that appears in the page lives. We've divided the body into several sections, starting with the header section. And in here we have the H1 that says 3D printer kit. You can see that section very clearly here in the document itself. Moving on from the header, we have the product section. I use the section tag here with the ID product, and then inside it I have an H2, a secondary header for the product details, an image of the 3D printer, and then a paragraph for the description and the price. And again, you can see all of these elements in our page itself. We have the H2 product details, we have the image of the 3D printer, and then we have the description and the price of our unit. After the product section comes the heart of our HTML, the most important part, and that's our order form. We've also labeled that with an H2, the text order form, and then we have our first actual interactive element. It's labeled as quantity ordered, and then we have a select and option group, which creates the dropdown. Let's take a quick look at this group, and then we'll review the HTML. So there you can see the quantity ordered text, as well as the dropdown with the values 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The purpose of the label should be obvious. It's to label the actual form element. We have the text in there, quantity ordered. But I want you to notice that the label has the for attribute, and the value is quantity. Right after that, we have our select with the ID quantity and the name quantity. Notice the value of the ID tag is the same as the value of the for tag. That's what links our label to our select. So this label is wedded to our select, and they actually interact with each other on the page. If I click on the actual label, notice the form field itself becomes active. That's true for any of the labels. That linking occurs with the for attribute in the label and the ID attribute in the select. We have 5 options in our select dropdown, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The value attribute is simply what is returned to the server if that option is selected. And notice we have an error here. This should be 5. Next, we have a series of text inputs. The first is simply for the name, the label for name. The visible text is name : and then we have the input. Again, we have the for value name in the label and the ID name in the input itself. This input has a couple of attributes. Type text, that means the user can type text in there. The ID is name and name is name. ID to link it to the label and also make it accessible to JavaScript. The name is the value that's paired when this is returned to the server if backend processing takes place. And then we have the required label. And that's simply client-side security to make sure that the form is not submitted if this field isn't filled out. There you can see the name field. I can fill it out. And then I can tab into the address field. If I attempt to place the order, because of the required field, it doesn't submit the form. Instead, it highlights the field and gives me a notification. Next, we have our email address. And notice this one's a little bit different. We have the label for the email address. Input type is not text, but email. By setting the type to email, what we're doing is we're directing a mobile device to bring up the email optimized keyboard for this form element. That's the optimized keyboard that's got the @ and the period, so you can easily type an email address. Next to the input on line 36, there's also an output field. That's initially blank, and that's used for JavaScript validation in case there is an email error. We then have the phone number field. Like the email field, this uses a different input type from text. It uses the tel or telephone input type. This brings up the optimized keyboard for entering a phone number if this form field is activated on a mobile device. The email field and the phone field are labeled as required, so we cannot submit without these. And now we're going to move down to shipping method. Let's review how this works on our form. So here you can see we've used radio buttons. We have the options of overnight, 2-day, and budget. Each of these has a cost that's associated with it that's added into the total if the form is submitted. So we have our label for the shipping method, and then we have our related inputs. We've got our radio button for overnight with its own label, a radio button for 2-day with its label, and a radio button for budget. Now, you notice that our radio buttons work together. Only one can be checked at a time. That's true because all of these have the same name attribute value. They're all named shipping. Each has a separate value because that value is reported to the backend server if this particular element is selected. So if the overnight element is selected, then the value is overnight. If the 2-day radio button is selected, the value is 2-day, and the value for budget is budget. Next up on our form is the billing address. This is a fairly typical street, city, and state form. This works for the United States. If this was international, we'd need to make some adjustments to this, but this can easily be filled out. For the state, we use a drop-down, and I can enter the zip code just like this. Pretty standard form. Let's take a look at the code. So the label for business address is B address. We use the text street address. And then the input type is text. ID is also B address. Name is B address. This is required. City is no different. The label for attribute is B city. That's the same as the ID and the input. We have the name attribute and the required attribute. For the state, we have the label B state. And then I use a select and option group so the user can select one option from all of these values. The reason is I want to standardize how the user writes the state. For example, my home state is Connecticut. Some people abbreviate CONN, but I want to make sure the standard CT abbreviation is used. This gives us valid and consistent data. So we have all the states listed. The user will select one, and the corresponding value will be reported. Then finally, we have the label for our zip code. This is pretty straightforward. We use an input type text, and the user enters a zip code. Shipping address gets interesting. Shipping address is identical to the billing address, except for this check mark, which auto-populates the fields if it's the same as the billing address. But we again have a street address, a city, a state, and a zip code. Finally, we have our method of payment. Again, radio buttons for PayPal or for credit card. These radio buttons are identified as the name payment. The PayPal one has the value PayPal, the credit card one has the value credit card. And these work just like the radio buttons from before. They're grouped by the name payment, so they work together. Only one can be selected at a time. Now, the next two divs are invisible when the actual page loads. I'm going to refresh the page, and you'll notice the place order button is down there, but there's nothing below the radio buttons for PayPal or credit card. These fields only appear when one of the radio buttons is selected. Regardless, the logical divisions are here with the single field for PayPal, asking for the PayPal email address. That also uses the input type email. And then after that, we have the standard credit card form. This asks for, in text fields, the name on the card number, the expiration date, and the 3-digit security code. Finally, we have our submit button. And then at the very end, we have the connection to sales.js, our JavaScript. You may be wondering why the JavaScript is loaded at the very end of the HTML document. You'll remember the CSS is loaded in the head or the beginning of the document. And the reason for this is the JavaScript references the HTML elements. And if they aren't already stored in the browser DOM or memory, that's going to cause an error. So by loading the JavaScript last, we ensure that anything the JavaScript references is already stored. All right, and that brings us to the end of our examination of the HTML. In the next video, we'll take a closer look at the CSS. Welcome to the video. In this video, we're going to be examining the CSS, Cascading Style Sheet code for our project. As you'll remember, the Cascading Style Sheet code is in charge of the design or the look and feel of our elements. Let's get right to it. Our CSS starts with the import command, and you'll notice that we're importing the Google fonts that we're going to use. In this case, we're using the fonts Poppins. We're importing the weights 400, 500, and 600, which are different levels of boldness. You can see right away they're applied in the body. So starting on line 3, we have our body selector, and these rules will serve as defaults for our entire CSS page. So our default font will be Poppins, and if the user doesn't have Poppins, if it doesn't load from Google Fonts, we'll use a sans serif font. We're resetting the margin and the padding to 0, and we're using the display type grid, which means we'll be using a CSS grid to lay out our elements. You can see our grid template columns is set to 1FR. FR stands for fractional unit, and we have a 20 pixel gap in our grid. Our default color is gray, 333, and our background color is a lighter gray, F9, F9, F9. On line 14, we have our credit card fields and our PayPal fields, and we set the display to none. You'll remember that the PayPal field and the credit card field only appear when these radio buttons are clicked. Here, we're just setting the default display to none, so when the page first loads, neither of those logical divisions with the IDs listed in the CSS are displayed. Now we've set up our header. Background color is gray to black. The color of our text is the lighter gray. We're aligning the text to the center. We've got 20 pixels of padding and a font size of 2M, which means 200% of the default. You'll notice here in the developer tools, if I go into the header section, I can actually see these particular settings visualized. You can see the 20 pixel padding in green all the way around the edge. You can see the colors and the alignment as well. If I hit the F1, you can see how the F1 within the header is laid out with its own padding. Next, we set up our image, a maximum width of 200 pixels, height auto, float left, and padding 20 pixels. The float left is how the image appears to float to the left of the descriptive text. It's kind of a quick, cheap way of setting up columns. It can lead to some layout problems later. However, this is a quick and easy way to put your images and text next to each other. Next, we set up our typography. Our H2 tags have a font weight of 500 and a font size of 1.5 em, making them a little bit bigger than normal, 150%. We set up our paragraph tags as well, with a font weight of 400 and a font size of 1 em. Next, we'll set up our form tag, which is the largest element within our page. We set its display to grid, a grid gap of 10 pixels, and padding of 20 pixels. You can see the padding in green and the grid gaps in red inside the form itself. This is a quick and easy way of laying out the form and keeping our elements neat. For each of the logical divisions within the form, on line 50, we have form div. We set their display to flex and align items to the center. We then deal with our inputs and labels. Notice there's a little bit of space to the right of those. We set the margin right 10 pixels. This is controlling essentially where the actual elements end. We don't want them to run over into the next form field, but we can set more margin if we want to. Next, we have form div input and form div label. We're just putting some margin space on those. And for our form labels, we're setting the font weight to 600, making those a little bolder than normal. For all of the text style inputs, we're setting up a little padding, little breathing space around those, and a font size of 1 em. That's for the actual text inside of these form fields. We could make this bigger or smaller if we wanted to. For example, 0.5 em would probably be too small. You can see now text size much smaller. Let's put that back. Form input type submit. This is our button. Again, we have some padding to give it some breathing room, a background color of gray, text color of white, no border, and notice the cursor rule. This cursor style means that when we text over it, the cursor will turn to a pointer. This doesn't work in emulation mode because emulation mode assumes that you are using some type of mobile device and you're using your finger. But if we were to go out of this mode, notice that when I go down to place order, you can see the cursor changes to the pointer. We also have a pseudo type on line 83. That changes the form field or the button type submit to a lighter gray when we hover over it. Notice when I point at it, we get that background color 666, which is the lighter gray. I set a rule for our credit card fields, just setting some margin space at the bottom. Now, line 91 is one of the more complex lines in our CSS. What that is doing is it's setting up our document for a minimum width of 768 pixels to change the way our layout works. Notice here the body is grid template columns, repeat 2, 1FR. What that means is for a width of 768 pixels and above, we're going to have 2 columns. And again, we're going to use that 1FR setting. So they essentially set their own width from the space available. If we're less than 768, then we get into mobile world. So if I turn on mobile emulation again, you can see here we're 1080 wide. If we get less than that, for example, this mobile device, now we have single column. But as soon as we get above that 768, that's 768 right there, we get our 2 columns. Below that, 1 column. So that's what line 91 is doing. It's a technique called responsive design that changes the design based on the width of the document. We could make other changes if we wanted to. For example, we could set our font family to Times New Roman when we get below 768. So pretty interesting to see how the CSS impacts the actual design, and especially how the responsive design works. So our form looks good across different width devices. Okay, it's time to look at the JavaScript, which provides the interactive elements of our page. There's only a couple of interactive elements here that are controlled by the JavaScript. The first is the pricing. You'll notice that I've already filled out this form, ordering 3 of the 3D printer units, selecting overnight shipping, and I filled out the address and all the other information. When I click place order, we get a total cost of $919.96, which is the correct cost for 3 of the units, as well as the shipping. And you'll notice that that calculation happens on submission of the form. Here's how. On line 1, the order form is the ID of the form. So we're essentially getting the form into the JavaScript, and then we're adding an event listener with add event listener, listening for the submit event. The submit event occurs when the button is pushed. If we look at the button on line 233, input type submit. So that cues the submit event when that button is pushed. So when the button is pushed, this function starts, and the first thing, event.prevent default. That prevents the form from submitting while we calculate the total cost in our JavaScript. On line 4, we're going to get the quantity. That goes to the quantity dropdown and gets the value of what we've selected. So I've just selected 2. So the quantity variable will hold the value 2. We then have our product cost, which is $299.99. And the next thing we get is the shipping method from our shipping radio buttons, overnight, 2-day, or budget. We set an initial shipping cost to 0. We then have this switch. If the shipping method is overnight, we set the shipping cost to $19.99. If it's 2-day, we set it to $9.99. And if it's budget, then we set the shipping cost value to 0. On line 22, we figure out the total cost. We multiply the product cost, $299.99, by the quantity, and then we add the shipping cost. Line 23 simply puts out the alert, which shows you the total cost. The total cost is massaged a little bit with the toFixed2 function, which gives us 2 places to the right of the decimal point, making it look like currency. So when I click here, you can see that total cost of $599.98 based on my current selections. If I were to change the shipping method to overnight and submit again, the math comes out a little differently, and our total cost is $619.97. The next bit of interactivity comes with our address forms, and this is where the user can copy the billing address to the shipping address if they check the box. You can see that bit of interactivity demonstrated right here as I check and uncheck this box. That box is ID'd as same address, so on line 26, I use getElementById same address. We're adding an event listener, but we're listening for the change event, when the status of that goes from checked to unchecked or unchecked to checked. When the status changes, we run the following function. We're going to check if it's checked or if it's not. So first, if it's checked, this.checked, what we're going to do is we're going to get the values from the billing address and assign them to the shipping address form fields. So on line 28, we're going to get document getElementById billing address.value and assign that to shipping address.value. We'll do the same thing for the city. We'll get document getElementById dcity.value and assign that to scity for shipping. Same thing for state. Same thing for zip. Now, if it's unchecked, that's taken care of by the else clause that starts on line 33. There, unchecked, we simply set the shipping address to a blank string, the city to a blank string, the state to a blank string, and the zip code to a blank string. You might remember that our email address has some additional validation. We're going to take a look at that now. Before we get to the code, let's review how this works. I'm going to erase my email address. And notice when I start typing in here, we get the message, please make sure your email is correct. And until I have a correctly formed email address in here, that message appears. If I make a mistake in my email address and it's not correctly formed, that message returns. So on line 40, we're waiting for the input event on that form field. When that event occurs, we're going to get whatever's in there and assign that to email. We get it from the event.target.value. You're curious what the event is? That has all the information about the event. We can log that out so you can see it. So now each time we type in that field, you're going to see part of the event. Let's load the console. And let's start typing an email address. And there's the event. There it is again. So the event has all the information about what just occurred. And if we go to event.targets.value way down here at the bottom, you can see the value is MA, which is exactly what I've typed inside the email address field. So that's bringing that into the code. This pattern is what's called a regular expression. This regular expression is the format for a properly formed email address. We've got characters before the @ sign. They can be letters, numbers, etc. Then we have an @ sign. We have more characters, and then we have the extension after the characters to the right of the @ sign. That extension can be 2 or 3 characters and can only have the letters A through Z. Regular expressions can get very complex, and regular expressions are essentially a course in and of themselves, but they can be extremely useful. Even if you don't understand the regular expression, these are all over the web. You can copy and paste one that's useful for you. So on lines 45 through 51, all we're doing is determining if what is inside the email box matches the pattern of a well-formed email address. If not, with line 45, if email.matchPattern does not match, that's what the exclamation point is for, we're going to display that error. Please make sure your email is correct. So we're going to take the email error div. We're going to change its display style to block so it appears. And then we're going to put the text inside in a p tag. Please make sure your email is correct. If it does match, then the else clause runs, and we simply clear out that text. Please make sure your email is correct. Finally, we're going to deal with the method of payment logic. If PayPal is selected, the PayPal div appears. If credit card is selected, the credit card div appears. That's controlled by these lines of code. Essentially, we've added a listener to the radio buttons. When the radio buttons change, then we're going to react. So if the PayPal radio button changes, then we're going to remove the display of the credit card fields. Document getElementById credit card fields, that style, that display none. On line 55, we're going to take the PayPal fields and we're going to display them by setting display to block. Document getElementById PayPal fields style display block. And then we do the same thing with the credit card radio button, essentially reversing that process, displaying the credit card fields on line 60 with document getElementById credit card fields style display block, and making the PayPal fields disappear. And that's it for our JavaScript, and that's the end of our Learn by Doing project. I'd encourage you to take this code and to make changes, additions, deletions, play with it, see what it does. That's how you really learn to code. And you're welcome to take this and use it in your own projects, change it up, and make it do something really interesting. Hey, thanks so much for watching this Learn by Doing course. My name is Mark. I'll see you next time.